If your own mother leaned across a dinner table and said, "I wish you were never born," what would you do? Freeze? Forgive? Or finally set the room on fire with the truth? The fork was already in my mouth when she said it. Chocolate, the expensive kind, the kind she saves for celebrations. Her smile was bright, her voice was bright, and the words were a knife wrapped in ribbon. I wish you were never born. Laughter cracked around the table like cheap glass. Jessica's quick, clipped lawyer laugh. Dad's wheeze. Amanda's theatrical giggle. No one looked at me first. Of course they didn't. They looked at each other, at their chorus, at the shared joke that had been rehearsed for decades. I set my fork down. I didn't slam it. That would have given them what they wanted. I placed it slowly on the plate, the way you lay a dangerous specimen under glass. My chest burned, my face stayed steady. "Well, Amanda," I said, turning to the youngest as her grin widened, "the feeling is mutual. The only difference is I actually have the power to make that wish come true." The room stopped. Not quiet, stopped. Even the chandelier seemed to hold its breath. Someone's wine glass clicked against a tooth. Mom's tongue found the corner of her mouth, ready to smooth this away like she always had. Jessica went still, calculation moving behind her eyes. Amanda's smirk faltered, then sharpened, like she decided to turn the cruelty into art. "Catherine," Dad said carefully, as if my name were a fuse. "It was a joke. Of course, everything is, when it's about me." I took one more bite of cake, cold now, and somehow sweeter for it, then slid my chair back. The scrape made everyone flinch. I placed my napkin on the plate, as if this were any other dinner, as if I were any other daughter, as if I hadn't just been erased in the prettiest room in the house. "That's delicious, Mom," I said, and looked at each of them long enough to be remembered. "Enjoy the rest of your party." I walked out of the dining room, past the hallway mirror where for 32 years I'd checked to make sure I looked safe, small, agreeable. Past the family portraits where my sisters leaned into the center and I leaned out of frame. Past the framed newspaper about Jessica's first big win. Past Amanda's canvases, all the colors she got to be. At the front door, my hand hovered on the knob. I could hear them behind me. Chairs shifting, whispers rising, the thrum of their unbroken rhythm finding itself again. Mom's voice reached me, soft and tinny. She's always so sensitive. I opened the door, stepped into air so cold it felt like a truth. My car smelled like winter and old books. There was a coffee cup rolling in the footwell, stale and sweet. I sat there a long time without starting the engine, my phone lighting up with messages I didn't read. The first memory arrived uninvited. 10 years old, district essay contest. The certificate warm in my hands. I'd run home from school and held it out like a living thing. Mom skimmed, smiled politely, then turned to Jessica's science fair volcano, already assigning it a place on the mantle. "This could get her a scholarship," she'd said. Like that absolved the way my name went translucent in the air. The second memory followed. 12 years old, quiet tryouts. Amanda's sketch taped to the fridge. Thick black lines and clever hands. My solo had made our music teacher cry. "You've got a nice hobby," Dad said, patting my shoulder without looking up from the mail. Laughter at the dinner table tonight had the exact same shape. I started the car. I drove with both hands strict on the wheel, as if I might drift back into them without discipline. The roads were empty, the sky a low lid. The radio was a whisper I didn't understand, then silence when I shut it off. I watched my hands, the way they steadied at red lights, the way they trembled when I thought of the word wish, and the way it had been aimed at me since childhood. My apartment was 5 floors up and end of hall quiet. I flicked the switch, and the small living room blinked awake. Secondhand couch, book tower by the window, a plant I kept forgetting to water, forgiving me again for coming home late. I kicked off my heels and looked around at all the things that belonged to me because I chose them, not because they'd been handed down and called a favor. I went straight to the desk. I didn't cry. I didn't break plates. I didn't pace the kitchen and call a friend to ask if I was overreacting. I opened my laptop. Search bar. High school English teacher jobs. Seattle, Portland, Denver. My fingers moved like they knew the way. Job portals I bookmarked but never touched. District pages with bland fonts and hopeful words were looking for someone who sees students. I pressed apply and felt something in my chest unlock, a small iron gate clicking open. Then another. Then another. I pulled open a new browser tab. Change mobile number. My carrier's page sighed at me. I filled out the form, requested a new line. My email inbox blinked with confirmations. I set a reminder to port the number at month's end. I typed as if I were handing myself papers no one could take back. A knock. My head snapped to the door, but it was only the neighbor's boots rumbling past. I listened to them fade down the stairwell, then exhaled. Voicemail icon blinking. 2 messages, then 4, then 7. Mom first, then Jessica. Amanda always last and always chirpy. I pressed delete without hitting play. The red badge disappeared. My apartment grew taller. I walked to the window. The city stared back, a streetlight painting a gold ladder on the hood of my car. Somewhere in the building, a low laugh, a microwave beep, a life that had nothing to do with mine. If you were never born, I said to my reflection, they would still have a party. The reflection stared back, not the ghost I had been at that table, but a woman whose eyes had stopped asking permission. My phone buzzed again. Dad. The banner notification scrolled a slice of his message. You know your mother didn't mean it like... Delete. I opened the closet, pulled a suitcase from the back, the one I used when chaperoning student trips, patched at the corners with bright tape so teenagers can spot me in crowds. I set it on the bed and unzipped it. The sound cut the room cleanly in two, before and after. I didn't feel it yet. I needed time to turn intent into spine. Instead, I walked the rooms of my life and took inventory. The books. Keep most. Donate the ones that taught me to tolerate smallness. The mug with the chip. Keep, because it holds tea and the memory of saving myself quietly on 1,000 lonely nights. The framed photo of my sisters and me at the lake. Wet hair, summer-proof. I held it until the glass warmed under my palm, then closed my eyes and tested the weight of letting go. It wasn't heavy. It wasn't heavy at all. My phone chimed again. Application received. Seattle Unified, then Portland. Then a Denver charter with a principal who wrote back within minutes. Your students' writing samples are exceptional. Can we set up a call this week? I laughed. It startled me, the way joy can sound like breaking. On the coffee table sat the birthday card I'd bought for Jessica out of reflex. Tasteful, expensive, safe. I slid it into the trash, then reconsidered and placed it on top. I wanted to see it. A relic of a woman who learned to make offerings to a fire that never warmed her. I brewed tea, watched the kettle steam like a signal flare in a quiet war. The first sip burned my tongue. I liked that it hurt. It made me feel present. The apartment silence changed timbre. Not empty, capacious, not barren, but available. Possibility hummed in the baseboards. I stood very still and let it settle. I won't be your glue, I said softly, and the room didn't bounce the words back at me the way my parents' house always had.
It just kept them. My phone lit again. A text from an unknown number. No doubt, Jessica using a colleague's phone to bypass my screen. Don't be dramatic, Kath. Tomorrow we'll laugh about this. I typed and erased 6 replies, then set the phone face down and walked away. Some messages answer themselves. At the window, I watched the bus kneel for a passenger, watched a street sweeper cart a clean line down the curb. The city was full of small mercies if you were awake for them. The suitcase was open on the bed, a dark mouth. I didn't fill it, but I placed one thing inside, my high school lanyard, the one with my photo and my name, the badge that pressed cool and certain against my sternum every weekday morning. I brushed my thumb across the plastic, across the letters that spelled Catherine. I'm not leaving because I'm weak, I told the badge. I'm leaving because I finally know my strength. The kettle cooled, the apartment dimmed. I turned off the lights and let the city back in through the blinds. Before sleep, I typed one final thing. 3 sentences, practiced and polished. The first lines of a new language. Effective immediately, I am unavailable for family dinners, calls, or visits. Please do not contact my workplace. If you need anything, contact each other. I didn't send it. Not yet. But it existed. That was enough. If you've ever sat at a table where your name was a punchline, I'm with you. Where are you watching from tonight? Tell me in the comments. I'm listening. What happens when you finally stop answering the people who taught you silence? 3 days passed before anyone noticed I'd stopped picking up. Mom's first voicemail was sharp in annoyance. Catherine, this is ridiculous. You embarrassed us all, and now you're sulking? Grow up. Jessica's followed, clipped and managerial. Mom's worried. Call her back before she makes a scene.
Amanda's came last, full of performative guilt and artificial laughter. Come on, Kath, it was just a joke. You know we love you. Delete, delete, delete. Every beep was another nail sealing the coffin of my old life. The peace after each deletion was addictive, a silence that didn't hurt anymore. That night, I turned off my phone entirely and sat on the floor, surrounded by half-packed boxes. The air smelled like cardboard and the faint sweetness of freedom. I thought of the phrase Amanda had used, "I wish you were never born," and realized that for once, she would get what she wanted. By the end of the week, the new number was active. No group chats, no family contacts, no familiar pings slicing through the evening. The void where they used to be felt like oxygen. I gave my landlord notice. 2 weeks. Seattle called first. The principal's voice was warm, curious. I read your essay on mentorship. Would you be open to a video call tomorrow? Yes, I said, steady and sure. Good, he replied. You sound like someone who knows her worth. I almost laughed. I'm learning. The next Sunday, I did something I hadn't done in years. I slept in. No early grocery runs for Mom, no baking for Jessica's brunch, no errands for Amanda's art shows. I brewed tea, opened the window, and watched the city breathe. At noon, there was a knock on my door. Mom. I saw her shadow through the peephole. Coat buttoned to the neck, phone clutched tight, the stance of a woman who expected the world to open just because she arrived. Sweetheart,
Please, let's talk. For a moment, I wanted to. I wanted to swing the door open and ask her why. Why did she laugh? Why did she let them make me the joke every year, every meal, every moment I dared to exist out loud? Instead, I stood silent. I let her voice fade. She stayed for 7 minutes, then left muttering something about being dramatic. The echo of her heels down the hallway sounded like applause. By week 3, I was gone. The movers came early, 2 college kids who didn't ask questions. They wrapped my life in brown paper and lifted it into the truck like it weighed nothing. Starting fresh, they asked. Starting true, I said. Seattle's skyline greeted me like a clean page. Rain on the windshield, coffee steam curling in the air, the slow hum of a city that didn't know my history. I found my new apartment, 3rd floor, near a park, faint smell of cedar and rain. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. The floorboards creaked, but not like complaint, more like welcome. That night, I lay on a mattress with no sheets yet, watching raindrops race down the window. For the first time, I didn't feel small. I felt unfinished, and that was beautiful. Monday morning came with light. Principal Reynolds met me in the office, handshake firm, eyes kind. "You must be Miss Clark," he said, reading from my new name tag. "Welcome to Northview." I smiled. "Thank you. It's just Catherine now." In that moment, I realized what freedom tasted like. Not sweetness, not triumph, but calm. The students were bright, loud, curious. When I spoke, they listened, not because they had to, but because they wanted to. It startled me to be heard. At lunch, a fellow teacher leaned over with a grin. "You're a natural," she said. "The kids adore you already." I blinked. No one had ever used the word adore about me before. Weeks passed. I settled. No phone calls, no guilt, no invisible strings pulling me backward. Until one day, the school secretary called out, "Miss Clark, there's a man on the line for you. Says he's your father." The name hit like static. "I'm sorry," I said. "You must have the wrong number." "He said his daughter is a teacher in Seattle, that she—" I hung up before she could finish. My pulse drummed in my ears. That evening, I walked to the pier and let the wind hit me hard. The waves roared against the dock, wild, unapologetic. For the first time, I didn't picture my family when I thought of the word home. A month later, I heard whispers, distant ones. A cousin posted on Facebook about family tension. Jessica and Amanda were fighting over something. Mom wasn't speaking to either of them. Dad had taken up golf just to escape the house. Their harmony had shattered, the sound of glass finally catching up to the moment I'd left the table. Vindication didn't come as revenge. It came as silence. They wanted me invisible. Now, they were choking on the wish they made. One night, as rain tapped the window, I brewed tea and opened my journal. "Sometimes absence is the sharpest revenge," I wrote. And as I looked around my small Seattle apartment, the books stacked high, the plants thriving under new light, the quiet humming with life, I realized I hadn't vanished at all. I'd finally appeared. Morning came the way forgiveness does, slow, unannounced, and not because anyone asked for it. Seattle's rain had taken the night off.
The air outside my window was rinsed and clean, the sky a pale sheet I could write a new life on. I dressed without hurry, soft sweater, flat shoes that wouldn't make my feet beg for mercy by noon, and tied my hair back like a promise. Today, we keep it simple. Northview High woke up loud. Lockers coughed open. Voices overlapped in the halls. A bird chorused with sarcasm. Someone's earbuds leaked drum and bass. Someone else laughed like they were afraid of what silence might say. I stood in my doorway, room 214, and felt the warm, ridiculous swell of belonging. The paper nameplate read, Catherine, and block letters. Not metal child, not glue, just me. First period, I handed out slim books with battered spines. I said, we're starting with stories about choosing yourself. I want your margins loud. I want your pens messy. I want you to argue with the pages. A boy in the back, Marcus, all shoulders and guarded eyes, lifted his hand. What if the page wins? I said, then you sharpen your pencil and try again. They smiled like they'd been given permission to breathe. We read, we underlined, we circled verbs that felt like engines. And when the bell rang, no one sprinted out. They moved the way you leave a room you'll return to. Second period, Nayeli lingered. She was small and fierce, a constellation of silver hoops climbing one ear. Miss Catherine, she said, voice carefully flat, do you think people get to pick their families later? Like, after? After what? After they figure out who they are. I looked at her and saw myself at 15, trying to be visible without being punished for it. Yes, you do. She nodded, wrote something on her palm with a gel pen, and left with her chin a little higher. At lunch, I took my tray to the teacher's lounge and sat by the window. The rain returned, the polite kind that dusts the city and leaves everything shining. Maria from history dropped into the chair across from me, breathless, curls frizzing with weather. She said, "You're the one." She stabbed her fork at the air as if she'd solved a mystery. "The kids keep quoting you." "Quoting me?" I asked. "Circle verbs that feel like engines." She grinned. "They're writing again. It's like you turned on a faucet." I laughed, surprised by how easy the sound was now. "They did that. I just handed them a wrench." "Same thing." She glanced at my hands. "You play?" I realized I'd been tapping a quiet rhythm on the table. Piano, badly, when no one's listening. Open mic at Harbor and Vine on Thursdays. No one listens there. Not the way that hurts. We traded stories, the little ones you can risk early. Favorite coffee shops, the curse of damp socks, the unholy joy of a properly sharpened pencil. No history that could be used as currency, just present tense facts. Back in 214, last period arrived jagged and restless. A pop quiz in chemistry had detonated half the floor's mood. I scrapped my plan and pulled out a stack of blank index cards. "Write down one sentence you don't believe you're allowed to say," I told them. "No names, no grades, just truth." Heads bent, pens scratched, thunder somewhere far off stitched the windows. I shuffled the cards and read them aloud, one by one, letting the room be the witness. "I'm afraid if I stop being funny, I'll disappear. I don't want to be a doctor. I want to build bicycles. I'm tired of taking care of everyone else's feelings before mine. I don't think anyone has really looked at me in a long time." We didn't talk for a while. Then we did, carefully, like crossing a river on stones that might wobble. When the final bell rang, a girl with chipped black nail polish folded her arms and said, "This class makes me mad in a good way." "That's writing," I said. "That's living." I stayed late grading, ink smudging my fingers, the room dimming into blue. The janitor flicked his light on and off in the hall, a gentle cattle prod toward home. I packed my bag and walked out into a city glazed with rain and possibility. The bookstore found me the way the best places do, by accident. I ducked in to escape a sudden cold mist, and there it was, a narrow space with a bell that chimed like mercy. The air smelt like paper and cedar. A man by the counter looked up, offered the small, unintrusive nod that means, take your time. I did. I read first lines the way people taste wine. I let them sit on my tongue, waiting for the note that says, yes, this one belongs to you. On a back table, a slim novel waited obediently. I opened it in the middle and found a paragraph that began, forgiveness is not a door we give others, it's a window we open for ourselves. I closed the book and pressed it flat to my chest for a moment, like it might study the new architecture growing there. On my way out, the man behind the counter, late 30s, ink on his fingers, smile that didn't ask for anything, said, good choice. Thanks, I said. It was loud. He laughed. Books that whisper won't save your life. Outside, the city was glossed and trembling. I took the long way home because I could. No one was waiting with a list. My phone, now a quiet companion instead of a leash, buzzed once with a message from Maria. Harbor and Vine, this Thursday. Come ruin a perfectly good piano with me. I typed back, deal. I only know 4 songs. She sent a line of clapping hands and a badly drawn treble clef. At the apartments, I kicked off my shoes and cooked something honest. Garlic, tomatoes, pasta that wasn't pretending to be anything else. I ate at the window with my knees up, rain stitching the dark like careful mending. Across the courtyard, a dog barked once and then thought better of it. Somewhere a siren wailed, distant and not for me. The quiet wasn't empty anymore. It had edges. It had shape. It was a room I could move around in without bruising my shins. After dishes, I pulled the old keyboard from the closet and set it on the table. My fingers hovered, clumsy and hopeful. The first chord was a wobble. The second found its footing. By the third, I remembered what my hands knew before my throat ever did. That sound can carry the truths we can't yet say out loud. I played until the air in the room changed temperature. I played until a neighbor tapped the wall. A polite yes, we hear you, keep going or please stop that, I chose to interpret as applause. I laughed, whispering, okay, okay, to the drywall, and let the last note fade. Before bed, I opened the box I hadn't dared since moving. Old awards, the ones I'd never been allowed to display because the living room belonged to Jessica's trophies and Amanda's frames. My fingers found the 10-year-old certificate from the district essay contest. Cheap ribbon, my name spelled right for once. I slid it into a new frame and hung it over my desk without ceremony. I stood back and examined the room. Nothing had changed, and everything had. A girl who needed someone to clap for her had finally decided to be the one with hands. Later, I journaled because the day asked me to. Not the blow-by-blow, the marrow. I wrote, peace isn't the absence of noise, it's the presence of attention. Today I paid attention to my students, to rain, to my own breath. I did not vanish. I expanded. I closed the notebook and set it under the bookstore novel, like stacking 2 elements of a small altar. I turned off the lights and left the blinds open so the city could keep me company. Sleep came without bargaining. In the dream, I walked back into the house I'd left. The table was set. The cake was uncut. But when I looked in the mirror of the hallway, the one that used to make me smaller, my reflection didn't step back to make room for others. It stepped forward. It reached out and touched the glass. It didn't disappear. I woke with a gasp that turned into a laugh. I made coffee I didn't rush, buttered toast like the luxury it is, and left early just so I could be the first person in room 214.
I opened the windows to let in the thin morning and wrote on the board in big, imperfect letters, "Write what saves you." The first student through the door read it and said, "That's corny." Yep, and true. He took his seat without arguing. By third period, the room smelled like wet hoodies and new paper. Nayeli slipped a tiny folded note onto my desk when she thought I wasn't looking. I waited until they were drafting before I opened it. 4 words in green ink. I am choosing mine. I pressed the paper flat with my palm and breathed. When the final bell let them go, I stayed. I erased the board slowly, watched the chalk dust bloom, and felt a gratitude so clean it almost embarrassed me. I locked the door, touched the Catherine on the nameplate, and walked into a corridor that didn't ask me to apologize for existing. Outside, the rain had stopped again. The city glittered like it had decided to be kind. Morning slid in under the blinds like a soft confession. I woke before the alarm, not from dread, but from the habit of old alarms that no longer ran my life. Coffee hissed, the kettle whining the way it always had when I was surviving instead of living. I liked that some things hadn't changed. It made the new parts easier to trust. Northview's hallways were already alive. Locker doors thunked, someone sprinted past me and skidded, socks betraying them on wax tile. Room 214 smelled like paper and citrus cleaner. I wrote the day's sentence on the board in ink-thick strokes. Right toward the thing you've been circling. I stood back, tilted my head, and felt that click behind the breastbone that says, "You're exactly where you said you'd be." I was sorting handouts when the office aide appeared in the doorway, cheeks pink from the cold. "Miss Catherine, there's mail for you." She handed over a stiff manila envelope with my name block printed. No return address. The postmark was my old city. My fingers went colder than the hallway. "Thanks," I said, trying to make the words sound like it wasn't carrying weight. She nodded and vanished, leaving the classroom quieter than it had any right to be. I set the envelope on my desk and put my palm on it. The paper held a temperature, like a body recently vacated. The clock made its small civic noise, keeping time as if time were well behaved. Students began to spill in, hoodies, wet hair, the pretense of not caring. I slid the envelope under a stack of literary magazines like that could stop whatever it was from arriving. "Phones away," I said, bright and ordinary. "We're going to wrestle with metaphors and win."
We did, mostly. I moved among them, circled verbs on their drafts, knelt to whisper to Marcus that humor was not a moat but a bridge if you let it be. When heads were down, my eyes dragged back to the corner of the desk where the envelope's edge peeked out like a shy truth. Third period, Nayeli caught it too. Her gaze flicked to the desk, then to me. "Bad news?" she mouthed. "Unknown," I mouthed back. She nodded like someone who understood that unknowns can be teeth or wings. By lunch, the envelope was a weather system. I carried it to the lounge like contraband. Maria clocked it in 2 bites of salad. "Ominous," she said. "Is it, them?" "It's from home," I said. My throat found the old narrowness. No return. "Open it in front of a friend," she said, then raised her hand. "Volunteer." We sat by the window, rain striated across the glass. I slid a butter knife under the flap and held my breath, a childish, automatic thing, as if lack of air could make the contents gentler. Inside, a single plastic sleeve. Inside the sleeve, newsprint, creased and smoothed. A photograph of a little girl with 2 serious eyes clutching a certificate like it held a door open. Me. Someone had circled a paragraph in red pen. The ink had bled a little into the fibers. Underneath, in blocky handwriting I knew like weather, I kept this. I should have said so. I'm sorry. Dad. The chair made a small sound as I sat back. Not shock, not grief, recognition. Like a bus finally arriving on a route you'd stopped waiting for. Maria read the note upside down, then looked at me without commentary. Mercy in the shape of restraint. That's a lot, she said softly. It is, and it isn't. Because this was not an apology that touched the bone, it was proof of something I'd needed and not had. That someone saw me. Not loudly enough, not soon enough, but saw me enough to clip and keep. My eyes stung. Not the kind of tears that flood, the kind that rim and hold. What do you want to do? Maria asked. Eat? Grade? Teach the next class? Put it somewhere it won't burn the room down. She nodded. I'll bring cookies to last period. Sugar helps with controlled fires. We laughed, thin and real. Back in 214, the envelope sat on my desk like a person who chose in silence for years and then cleared their throat. I slid the sleeve into my top drawer, beneath the extra pens and the emergency talklet, a small archive labeled Later. We read poems, we argued kindly, we practiced beginning again at the same sentence until it said something braver. I told them about red ink and how it can mean I see you working if you use it right. When the day emptied itself, my body remembered the heat of adrenaline and then the cool after. I sat alone and let the quiet come. The phone on my desk, a landline with a coil that remembered the old ways, lit and rang. Room 214, I said. Miss Catherine? Sorry to bother you. There's another delivery, a small one. Minutes later, a padded envelope appeared. No postmark, hand-delivered. The label printed my name with the correct spelling. The sender line read simply, Reynolds. I frowned and opened it. Inside, a folded note and a smaller envelope banded in school mail tape. I recognized the principal's tidy script. Saw this at the front desk. I didn't open the inner envelope, privacy matters, but I noticed your face. If you want me to run interference, say the word. P. Reynolds. The inner envelope was addressed in my mother's handwriting. The room tilted. A soft internal shift like a ship easing over a swell. I didn't open it. I couldn't smell smoke yet, but I knew how quickly certain papers catch. I set it beside the drawer with the clipping and stared at it like I was trying to read the weight through the seal. I turned my chair and looked at the board instead, right toward the thing you've been circling. Sometimes the instruction is a dare. I picked up a dry erase marker and wrote 3 lines under it. What do I owe? What do I want? What keeps me safe? I said the questions out loud, a private call and response, and the room, blessed room, held them without opinion. Then I put the cap on the marker and stood. I walked the envelope to the filing cabinet, the cheap metal kind that knows secrets. I opened the bottom drawer and slid the letter in behind a hanging folder labeled Student Recommendations. The label felt correct. To recommend is to speak for. I wasn't ready for anyone to speak for me yet. At dismissal, Marcus hovered, pretending to fix a jammed zipper on his backpack. You good, miss? He asked, not looking at me. Like, good? I'm sound. Sometimes that's better than good. He zipped successfully, satisfied. Okay, my aunt says mail is just other people's plans trying to sit on your table. Your aunt is a poet, I said. She sells insurance, he shrugged, but yeah. I locked up, In the office, Reynolds looked up from his monitor, reading my face like a careful editor. "All right?" he asked. "Working on it," I said. "Let me know if you want any padding between you and whatever's in circulation." "Thank you," I said, and meant more than the sentence contained. Evening came with its familiar mercies. I walked to the water, let the wind clean the thinking parts. Sea lions heckled from a raft. A child cried until the tide approved of her shoes. The city did its glittering. I bought soup from a place that always forgets my bread and always remembers my name. Back home, I set the clipping on the table. I stared at the 10-year-old me and wanted to perform time travel. Arm around her shoulder, a whispered, "They don't get to tell you what your name means." I ran a finger along the cheap frame I'd picked for the certificate last night and laughed at the coincidence I didn't believe in. I put the clipping behind the glass, tucked into the frame with the award, 2 layers of proof pressed together, what I had made and what someone else had quietly saved. It didn't absolve anything, but it gave the wall a new gravity. Later, at the keyboard, my hands found a melody they hadn't learned. A line that sounded like a hallway where footsteps pause. I played it until it became something I could walk through without looking back. When I finally opened my journal, I didn't write about the envelope. Not directly. I wrote about oxygen, about the way some rooms have less of it and how you adapt to the thinness until one day your lungs revolt and demand sea level. I wrote, "Today, an old altitude sent a postcard. I looked at it. I did not go back to live there." I closed the notebook and made tea. While the kettle breathed, I stood at the window. In an apartment across the way, a family moved around a table with 3 place settings, then a 4th added after someone laughed and pulled up a chair. The odd tenderness of strangers. I slept with the filing cabinet drawing a thin line of attention in the corner of the room. Not fear, not yet. A hum. A possibility I hadn't invited but wouldn't pretend away. In the morning, I would decide whether to open my mother's letter. I would decide whether to ask Reynolds to reroute future mail to the office, to let another adult hold the first impact. I would decide whether to write back or to keep practicing the hard art of quiet. For the first time in years, the choice felt like mine. If a letter arrived from someone you hurt you, no return address, just their handwriting, would you open it now, save it for later, or never open it at all? Tell me why. Morning held its breath. The kettle ticked toward a boil, then stilled as if the room itself were listening for my decision. I dressed like the day might tip. Dark sweater, steady shoes, and slipped the small key to my filing cabinet into my pocket the way swimmers tuck a ring before a cold plunge. Room 214 smelled like pencil shavings and rain-damp denim. I wrote the day's line on the board, almost as a dare to myself. Open what you're afraid will close you. The marker squeaked, then went quiet. The letters looked braver than I felt. Before first bell, I unlocked the bottom drawer. The metal rasped, a sound I knew from older lives. The inner envelope sat where I'd left it, school mail taped neat as a bandage, my name in my mother's handwriting. Careful, purposeful, a little too elegant for apology. I set it on the desk and waited for my hands to steady. They did not. I opened it anyway. The paper inside smelled faintly like perfume I associated with holidays. Cinnamon, orange peel, a floral note that always arrived before she did. 1 page, front and back. No stationery crest this time, just line paper torn from a pad. A small mercy. Catherine, I'm writing because silence has a cost. I didn't understand it until your absence sent the bill to my door.
What I said at dinner was wrong. What I laughed at was worse. I can tell you I was tired, or that I thought we were teasing like we always do, or that wine makes cowards of us. All of that might even be true. None of it is a reason. I have been a mother who measures love in outcomes. Jessica made it easy to count. Amanda made it easy to defend. You made it hard because you never asked for what you deserved, and I mistook that for not needing it. That was my failure, not your modesty. I remember the essay. Your father clipped it. I pretended I didn't notice because I was afraid to admit that a page with your name on it could move me the way it did. The cake was store-bought that year because I'd been short on time. I told myself you wouldn't mind. I think I told myself that too many times. I don't know how to be different except to begin. I am sorry. I am not asking you to forgive me because I need it. I am asking you to live whatever life you want without my voice in it, unless you choose otherwise. If you choose otherwise, my door is open. I would like to know the woman you became without me.
Mother. There was a postscript. The letters were smaller, as if written after the courage had cooled. P.S. Your father misses you. He won't say it to your face. He asked the school for your number, and I told him not to. I don't know if that was right. He kept that clipping for 22 years. The page trembled. Maybe it was my hands. Maybe it was the paper deciding what kind of story it wanted to be in. I laid it flat and read it again. The way you read a poem differently when you're alone than you do when someone is watching you understand. It wasn't manipulation. It wasn't absolution. It was something that had the shape of both and neither, an attempt with edges. The bell rang. A flood of shoes and voices carried the letter back into the drawer for me. I slid it there without a ceremony and greeted Sir's period with the muscle of routine. We're finishing our drafts, I said, and then we're trying something new. Letters you'll never send. Groans, laughter, two hands shot up with what ifs. I held up a palm. No one reads them unless you say so. You can write to a person, a place, a year of your life, an object, a version of yourself. Be honest enough to embarrass future you. Pens hit paper like rain starts, scattered, then steady. I moved among them, the letter in the drawer like a small meteor I'd chosen not to pull from the sky. Marcus had written the word Dad in the corner and drawn a box around it like a fence. What if the letter is just swear words? He asked under his breath. That's a dialect. Translate as needed. He smirked and got to work. Nayeli's eyes were glass bright, her hand quick. When I paused at her desk, she laid her forearm across the page, shielding what mattered. Later, she asked. Later, I said. Second period broke my rule about not reading unless invited. A girl named Ruby pressed her paper into my palm as if passing a secret note across the universe. Dear me at 13, it began. You're not too much. They're too small. When I looked up, she was watching my face like a weather report. I nodded warm. She breathed. By lunch, I decided the letter would not be a bomb. It would be a book, on a shelf I could take down when I chose. I sat with Maria by the window, the rain slicing the view into polite privacy. Well, she asked, gently. She apologized in a way that looked like the truth she could bear. That's something, Maria said. It is. It's not everything. She nudged my shoulder. There's a difference between opening the letter and reopening the wound. I know, I said, and surprised myself by meaning it. Last period, the room was all breath and ink. We read two volunteers' letters out loud. Names redacted, feelings not.
A boy wrote to the version of himself that laughs first so nobody notices he's lonely. A girl wrote to a house she moved out of at 7, apologizing to the banister for the way her small hands had gripped it too hard. When the final bell released them, Marcus lingered, his backpack hanging off one shoulder, an index card folded 4 times in his fist. He set it on my desk without meeting my eyes. "For the assignment," he said. "Anonymous, I guess." After he left, I unfolded it. "Dear old man," it read. "I learned to be funny because talking normal made me disappear. I learned jokes in your shadow. I'm stepping where the light is. From now on, bring sunglasses." I smiled into the quiet. The letter in my drawer throbbed less. Maybe it had learned something too. I walked to the office to photocopy the rubric for tomorrow. Reynolds looked up as the machine warmed, that editors look again. "You look, taller," he said. "I read something," I replied. "Ah," he said. "Books that whisper won't save your life." "You've met my bookseller," I said, and we both laughed. Back home, I put the kettle on and set my mother's letter on the table. I read it a 3rd time, tracing where she avoided specifics. The sentence about the cake. The sentence about outcomes. The absence where the sentence, "I loved you poorly," might have lived. I let it be what it was. A door she'd opened. A room I wasn't obligated to enter. I wrote my own letter in a notebook that had never failed me. Not to send, to say. "Mother, I am safe. You are learning to name things. I am learning to be seen without auditioning. These are both true at once. The day you laughed, I chose oxygen. I will choose it again tomorrow. I wish for you a window. I wish for me a wide street with rain and bookstores and students who write like engines. I am not coming home. I am home." I closed the notebook and placed it on top of hers. 2 weights, 2 hands. At the keyboard, I found the melody from last night and pushed it forward until it walked. The apartment agreed with me in small creaks. The plant by the window lifted its leaves like a slow applause. When the kettle sighed, I poured tea and stood at the window. Across the courtyard, the family of 4 clinked glasses and laughed with their whole throats. No one was the punchline. The sound landed in my chest without envy. My phone buzzed with a message from Maria. "Tomorrow, we make the kids write letters to their future editors." I typed back, "Deal," and to their past selves who deserve better margins. She sent a thumbs up, followed by a single line. "Proud of you." It's wild how those words can still feel like water after a long drought. I slid my mother's letter into a clear sleeve and tucked it behind the framed certificate on my wall. Not in front of, not hidden. 2 thin histories paired, each confessing something the other couldn't manage alone. I made and I kept. It didn't fix anything. It didn't break anything further. It adjusted the room's center of gravity. Sleep came late, but clean. When it arrived, it did not bring their house. At dawn, I woke wanting to work. I brewed coffee, took the bus early, and opened room 214 to the smell of ground beans and floor polish. On the board, I wrote, "Letters unsent are still letters." Underneath, smaller, "So are boundaries." Nayeli appeared in the doorway before the first bell, a cautious grin making space on her face. "I read mine to my aunt," she said. She cried. Then she made eggs that didn't taste like sorry. "That sounds like love," I said. "It does," she agreed. "Hey, did you open the thing?" "I did," I said, "and I stayed here." She nodded like a colleague. "Good.
You belong in this room. The bell rang. Footsteps, voices, the daily rising tide. I tugged open the drawer to find a fresh stack of index cards. The letter shifted and settled, a small animal making peace with the shape of its cage. I let it rest. I let myself teach. The invitation wasn't a summons. It didn't arrive in a thick envelope with our family name embossed across the flap. It was printed on cheap stock with a crooked staple. Northview Literary Showcase. Families welcome. My students' names were listed in small, heroic type. Marcus, Nayeli, Ruby. Beside mine, faculty mentor. At the bottom, in fine print that made me smile, a note from the committee. Light refreshments, community encouraged. I tacked it to the classroom corkboard and felt the room breathe a little warmer. "Are you coming?" Marcus asked, trying hard not to sound hopeful. "I think I have to," I said. "They promised light refreshments." He snorted. "You're funny for an English teacher." "Don't tell anyone. It ruins the brand." The week folded itself carefully. Lesson plans, rain, the hum of printer drums. Laughter that wasn't at anyone's expense. On Thursday morning, the bookstore bell chimed me into cedar air and paper dust. He was there again, ink on his fingers, that unassuming smile. "Back for something that whispers or something that shouts?" he asked. "Both. I'm greedier than I look." He slid a book across the counter. Essays about beginning again. This one does both. "Do you ever recommend a bad book?" I asked. "Frequently," he said. "I just don't do it to you." I laughed. We stood in the gentle pause that appears when two people aren't rushing past themselves. "I'm David," he said, like an offer, not a requirement. "Catherine." He nodded at the program clutched in my hand. "You presenting?" "My students. I taught them where to put the commas and when to ignore me." "Best kind of teaching," he said. "Do you have people coming?" "I do, but they're mine. I chose them." "Good," he said, softly. "That's what people mean when they say home." I carried his words with the book, both wrapped in thin paper. That afternoon, Nayeli hovered in my doorway with a smile she hadn't grown up with. My aunt's making empanadas. She brandished a foil tray like a trophy. She says light refreshments are a challenge. "Your aunt is a hero," I said. "She sells insurance," she replied deadpan. Then, "She's a hero." By evening, the auditorium glowed like a low heart, the kind of school light that makes everything look a little kinder. Folding chairs squeaked into rows. A jazz trio tuned their courage. The refreshment table sagged under the weight of community. Store-bought cookies, and someone's homemade flan, paper cups, a punch of unknown origin that stained tongues red. My roll filled with the people I'd let into the new architecture. Maria from history, cheeks pink with pride. The janitor in a collared shirt that made him look like someone who forgot to stop being handsome. 3 teachers from the math wing who'd adopted my students this year like honorary nieces and nephews. Then the last chair in the row scraped forward. David, holding 2 paper cups.
I brought the punch of unknown origin. I like to live dangerously. We sat shoulder to shoulder, not because we had to, but because there was room. I watched my students step into the lights one by one, voices trembling and then steadying, reading letters to past selves and future editors, to houses and hands and songs that had saved them. Marcus read his last. Sunglasses perched on his head like a joke he'd grown out of.
Dear old man, he began, I learned jokes in your shadow. I'm stepping where the light is. From now on, bring sunglasses. The room exhaled, then clapped like it meant it. He glanced at me, quick and bright. I clapped until my palms stung. These were the loudest rooms I'd ever been inside that didn't drown me out. Afterward, we ate flan and sugar cookies that tasted like the earnestness of bake sales. People hugged people they weren't related to. Someone fixed the punch bowl with duct tape. Maria caught my sleeve, her eyes doing the smiling. You built something, she said. I think we all did, I replied. You let it, which counts, she said firmly. Then, with that look only friends get to give you, you look like a person who sleeps. I do, I said. Surprised to feel the truth of it lands like a warm coat. More nights than not. The quiet invitation arrived then, not from my old house, not from my mother's careful hand, but from the current that was carrying me forward. Principal Reynolds tapped the mic with the caution of a man who respects feedback forms. Before we go, we'd like to recognize a teacher who brought this showcase to life. Miss Catherine, will you join us? The room turned, polite and expectant. I felt the old instinct rise, shrink, deflect, point to someone shinier. I let the instinct go by like a bus I didn't have to catch. I stood, walked, accepted flowers that didn't feel like a bribe, spoke into a microphone without apologizing for the sound of my own voice. These students did the work, I said. They set their own tables and invited themselves to sit down. All I did was turn the lights on. I glanced toward my row. Maria's nod was a benediction. The janitor's thumbs up was a pledge. David's quiet smile felt like a door I wanted to keep finding open. Thank you for showing up for them and for each other. This is what a home can be. The applause wasn't thunder. It was rain. Steady, honest, all the leaves lifting to drink. Later, when the chairs were folded and the punch of unknown origin had stained a section of gym floor cherry red for a future custodian to curse, I walked alone down the corridor that led back to room 214. The building hummed its after-hours song. In my classroom, the board still held yesterday's sentence. Letters unsent are still letters. So are boundaries.